Hello, everyone, and welcome to Community Outlook 2025, Trends and Predictions. I am Shaveta Sharma, Practice Head for Web Development and Communities at Grazity Interactive, and I'll be the host for you guys today. Communities are evolving rapidly. AI is revolutionizing engagement. Hyper-personalization is redefining members. Experience and data-driven strategies are deeper connections. Today, we will explore what's next in the online communities and how we can stay ahead. Today, I have an incredible lineup with me who will be providing you more details on the same. So I have Brian Oblinger, Strategic Community Consultant at Brian Oblinger Strategy Consulting. I have Todd Nilson, President and Community Strategist at Clock Tower Advisor. And I have Michel, who is a Senior Community Strategist at Chorus. Today, throughout the session, we'll dive deep into AI-powered engagement, hybrid communities, gamification, data privacy, and trends and predictions, and the future of community. So before any ado, let's get started with our first question for the day. The rise of AI and personalization in communities. As we all know, and as we all are hearing the word AI and automations are reshaping how communities operate, enabling hyper-personalization and predictive engagement, and the real-time support. But what does that really mean for the community manager, the strategist, and people like us who are using the community? Brian, so I want to hear from you. You are working with such a big brands. How you feel that AI is transferring the engagement and the community interactions?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is the first time I'm hearing of AI, actually, so I'll have to. No, I'm just kidding. It's a hot topic, right? It's coming up a lot. I think where most businesses are at, most of my clients, people that I talk to, is that we're still kind of in a position where, for the most part, it's a collection of technologies, right? It's a lot of APIs and sort of developer tools and things like that, and so. While people are interested and want to understand what the potential impacts could be, what the use cases are, what the various technologies are, they're really waiting for, it to be productized, right? Where it's something they can go and buy and install. Obviously, you have one of those, so you're kind of first to market with an actual product, right? That people can deploy and get value, which is great. So I think we're kind of in a little bit of a middle space, like if you think of the old hype cycle chart, we're kind of down in one of the dips in there somewhere, and people are waiting for, to kind of understand it. I think, you sort of teed up like the different roles there. Community professionals, community managers are definitely using it to, craft content and, things like that. I think from the user perspective, we're, outside of sort of the search products and those kinds of things, still waiting for a lot of the vendors to kind of release whatever it is that they have from an AI perspective. But there's no shortage of, kind of, I guess, excitement or interest around it for sure.
Okay. Great. So Brian, totally agree with you. We are hearing a lot, but how are we going to use it? Very few people are answering to those questions, like what I want from AI. It's like, okay, content writing is just one of the stuff. So we'd like to hear from Michel, who is working for one of the platform, which is the renowned platform Chorus. And the expectation is that AI with Chorus will do wonders. So, Michel, if you could provide us more details on what Chorus is doing, what the roadmap look like, what we can expect from Chorus when we are talking about AI in particular.
Yeah, well, that's a large question to answer. First off, I would start with what basically already exists for a while, where in fact, there is a leverage of machine learning to detect bad content. So it's something that obviously has its advantages, and AI can do better on that. So to leverage automation to help on moderating the content. There is also, when we speak about sentiment analysis, the possibility to leverage AI to get the sentiment and have a better information around the prioritization, so content can be presented to the right persons or faster. And in fact, behind the scene, it could be also around, it is in some tool in the AI assistance of the agents, being someone connected and then being able to get the AI to have the collection of resources and options in what to do for specific cases. So having just to work faster instead of getting into too much search, etc. So Brian just mentioned like the AI search. It's something that obviously can help in these agent moderators finding the right information to get faster. But opening to the future, so there are multiple pillars that could be supported. One is around the automation, like the moderation bit we mentioned, but also around personalization, so to support the experience of the members. So this is something that being crafted. So I can't really tell in terms of roadmaps when, how, etc. But this is something that is being developed. And there is the third pillar, which is the insights, because behind the scene, being able to leverage basically how content is helping others, if there are some knowledge gaps that are identified, so to help with the content planning, and basically improving this knowledge cycle to make sure that members can find what they are looking for.
Exactly. I totally agree on that, Michel. And because when we are talking about AI in the community, I think so the most common thing what people are looking, like in social media, if you see particular post, the same content gonna come up, so it saves that. And I think so that's the expectation from the community, that if I'm looking for same content or I'm going through particular categories, that should be the priority for me. That should be what is expected out of the system, because it should be so advanced. But maybe my navigation should change that way. Definitely, you touched one of the biggest point, like moderation. But what about if I don't have the answers to the post, which are like 7 weeks old in the system? Are we getting automatic answers to it? Or are we escalating those questions? And so on. I think so. Definitely, there are a lot of stuff. And we believe that Chorus and Grazity both are working on some of the scenarios on AI. Moderation, definitely, it's one of the biggest pain point for every community users. And definitely, we all are working towards that one goal, how AI could help the user. But in the same time, it shouldn't lose the touch of that human, why people are in the community. So I think so that should be there, but definitely the AI part should be there. Okay, so Todd, what about you? From the strategy perspective, what do you think the community leaders are looking in the AI? Is it the AI implementation, maintenance, or authenticity? How you will take AI into the strategies?
Yeah, so first of all, great to be here today. And Shaveta, great to see your smiling face as always. And I'm honored to be on here with Michel and Brian. This is a lot of fun to have these kinds of conversations, even though I'm not a big person for gazing into crystal balls and making predictions about the future. I think what's particularly challenging about implementing AI right now is that it is a fast-moving target. I'm a big follower of Matt Wolf's almost daily updates that are breathless about the latest happenings in AI and that world. And I mean, we don't even know which large language models are taking a lead at the moment, let alone, more high order things like agentic AI. I think all of us are experimenting and playing and learning, and that as community professionals is all we can do at this point, which is to keep playing with the tools, keep learning about them, and trying to negotiate that role that we have as humans, and trying to figure out where AI can best fit into those roles. So I'm still a big fan of small experiments and trying to see where these things may fit into an organization. But as you said, I mean, how do you keep those voices authentic? As a community manager, as a community professional, as you have opportunities to engage in moderation or content creation or conversation within communities, I think that there is potential for AI to have an impact on the things we say, or to remind us of things that we maybe don't have top of mind that we've said before. But it's so important not to just take those suggested pieces of content and drop them in. Your community has a brand and a character and a voice to it, as do you as a professional, as the person who's in that community, as its evangelist, as a facilitator within that space, and you need to stay true to that. So I think that from an implementation standpoint, trying things a bit at a time, not hastily running in and adopting every new tool is important. I would also say that it's important to think about disclosures within the platform. There are ethical considerations. Any of the platform creators need to do a responsible job of talking about how they're using AI, how they're protecting the privacy of people who are using those platforms. And there's, I think, a dimension of ethical training and disclosure that needs to happen within communities as well, that we as community professionals are either somewhere on the page or somewhere within the end user license agreement or the terms or something. We need to talk about how and when we'll use AI, and also what kind of AI may be okay for members to use in the community. There are legal ramifications. For example, if someone is implementing AI generated images or video and dropping it into your community, do your terms and conditions and guidelines allow for it? And what are your legal protections around that if someone decides to come after the person that created that video and put it into your community space? Now, in a lot of cases, I'd like to believe that our standard kinds of policies will protect us from that sort of thing, but it's something that we all should be thinking about. We should be thinking about the legal ramifications and the ethical ramifications of using these platforms.
Definitely. Agreed. Because when we are talking about AI, there is two types of people. One who would be using it for the betterment, one who would be using in the naughtiest way. So definitely we need to make sure how we guys are using it and how we are educating our users and our community guys to use it. So definitely I think so. That's really important to understand. Yes, we need a AI, but to what extensive level we are using it and how we want to take it forward. So definitely. Okay, that's really interesting. And I think so that's the topic that we can go on and on talking about AI. So I'll just stop here, and because we have other topics to discuss. So another, I think so, question I have, or another topic that we want to really touch, is the shift to hybrid and niche communities. As we know, hybrid, when we talk about hybrid, some is like work from home, work from office, that's the hybrid. But in community world, when we are talking about hybrid, it means we are blending the digital and the real world interactions. So what we are seeing in the community today is that most of the community are built on niche or very specific interactions or industries. Earlier, it was the one era where the community has everything and anything. Now, everyone wants to be very particular about their industries, very niche about what the interest of people is. So Todd, you have worked with so many brands, and maybe you have created multiple hybrid strategies for a lot of the customers. So I just want to have more updates from you, how you tackle it. What do you think about the hybrid models of the communities? And is it okay to be having a niche community for your specific requirements?
I think that the niching down of communities is something that we continue to see evolve over time, especially in the past couple of years since the COVID pandemic, where people became a little more keenly interested in online engagement for people. And then in the time since the pandemic really kind of dissipated, and there's a lot more interest in coming back to in-person kinds of interactions. Now, I think this really is the time when hybrid, style communities can be very powerful for organizations. It's really something since my very first communities that I did work for had as a use case going in, where you've got an annual conference and you want to be able to make this, this conference something that is more lasting, more engaging throughout the course of a year. I think many organizations are thinking about omni-channel experiences in the work that they do. I don't do a bunch of work in the B2C space. I'm a little bit more B2B and nonprofit, but the idea of having in-store experiences supported by online community experiences is particularly powerful. I think, in-person sessions, workshops, how-tos, even, chapter meetings, is something that can be powerfully combined. Even as I think about, organizations, acting within our own space as community professionals, you see things like, led by and CMX with their chapter meetings and, get-togethers in live meeting scenarios as opposed to the online as well. These things go hand in hand, and I think that getting really specific and really nerdy about the purposes of communities, it's is something that I welcome and see it as something that's probably just going to continue on and get more powerful as we go. It's less now about setting the platform, and I think more organizations are, rightly so, recognizing that the platform is not the community. It's all the people that are engaging, with your brand or your organization over time. And so it's about, the success factors of this, I would say, is about making sure that it's a seamlessly integrated experience, making sure your messaging and your branding are consistent, that the technology is contemporary and feels easy for the users, and that you're tying the value between those live and virtual events as well.
Okay, great insight, Todd. So I'll ask Michel, when we are talking about Chorus and when we see a lot of communities on Chorus, you may have experience strategizing some hybrid communities and some niche communities with a particular use case. If you want to share some use case, what was your experience when we are building these hybrid or niche communities or any of the customer?
So about the niche communities, well, first, so the longest memory I have was basically linked with themes. In a community that was oriented into, the core business, they have identified groups that had different interests within the community. It was not really as trendy or a huge volume that was necessary to create its own specific space and forum, etc. But they wanted also to still recognize that and so create these little spaces, so leveraging groups to have related conversations, but that does not touch everyone or the audience in the community, and that permits also to then have some measurement about the traction. Is it a group that can live and if it can expand and then growing organically into the community? So the thematical approach. And more recently it was more around locations, because when you have a worldwide brand, so operating everywhere, but you get to know that there is a group of users, a cluster of your members that, for example, lives in Paris. Good to have these niche so they can, within their own space, get to exchange with each other, and that can lead then to events because they get to meet if this is possible. So as Todd mentioned, like a local chapter and get to share. So the group dynamic within the more established community. But there is also the possibility to have a niche like for the whole community. I worked with a brand where it's worldwide, but they wanted just to serve a subset of users who are located in the US and not all the users in the US. So it was really a small group, adding to the challenge of having that as a closed community, which means that findability and acquiring, getting to promote the community become a challenge, because this means the community team needs to actively promote and speak to all the relevant persons around that community. But that means having the full space dedicated to that small group, and challenge of having much more effort to having this number game, so there is enough people so they get to speak to each other and not needing as much as effort to make it live.
Definitely, totally on that, Michel. Brian, any thoughts from you? Anything what Todd and Michel may not have covered? You want to get some pointers here?
No, I mean, I think they covered it. I think we're definitely seeing a shift somewhat to, sort of smaller niche communities. They always existed. I think just the tendency for people to gravitate towards them is, somewhat different. We're seeing that with some of the shifts in social media as people kind of leave some of those platforms for many, many reasons that we don't need to get into here, but we know that that's happening. We're seeing it happen. And so, I don't think those are like new communities necessarily. It's just that they kind of their importance level has become more important. yeah, I think we'll see, quite a bit of that going forward. And that is on us as community builders to consider that as part of our strategy and think about how we address people in those ways. And I think, privacy and those sorts of things, very similar to the AI conversation. Todd talked at length, right, about policy making and governance, and those things just become even more important as people seek kind of those, better moderated, safer spaces, if you will.
Sure. Okay, great insights. And I think so it's really helpful when people are having little confusion about what are these niche communities, what are they? And I think so it's only that it was there, but now it is becoming a trend and people are talking about these niche communities. Okay, I think so the next topic gonna be very interesting because it is related to gamification, the user-generated content, and the community-driven engagement that is the primary goal of anyone who builds the community. I think so these all are gamification, user content to content is one of the very important and key thing for getting the engagement or participation into the community and also making the advocates, right? Michel, what is your role or what do you think about the gamification part? We know we talk about this when we get the new community users coming in, we'll say, okay, we need to have some gamification so we keep the users engaged in the community. So we want to learn from you what gamification means to you as a strategist and how you are implementing it.
Gamification, so introduction of game type of reward into a non-game environment. So setting here a bit of definition. In fact, there is the part I see today as being a community strategist at Coros, and my first exposure to it when I was myself in a community and I get to set a gamification for it. And when it was to that, so having like to recognize the members, basically being able to encourage behaviors so that will have an impact. So about the engagement, but what do we want to drive as a behavior? What are the things that matters? So there is this question of, well, do we want to just push for conversations or quality conversations? Because in fact, solutions or best answers are the grail being looked for. So there is the prioritization exercise around what do we need to achieve with this gamification? So encouraging some behaviors. So we want qualitative engagements and discussions. So being able to participate in existing conversations instead of creating new questions, etc. And so there is all this set of behavior and being able to recognize so that positive behavior gets rewarded. And there is obviously the intrinsic satisfaction of being seen, and that also have an educative effect, peer group mimicking of showing that people get rewarded for the best answers, etc. And so showing the example to the newcomers. So there is virtuous cycle created around that. And often I see gamification being taken a bit, not as an afterthought, but a bit in a rush. Because the timelines makes that, well, we need to go fast, etc. And with that, there is sometimes the missed opportunity of having some fun, because people goes in community because they are looking for something, but it's also a trade. They are investing their time, they are reading lots of content. Depending the efficiency of the search, they can read many posts before finding what they are looking for. And when they are participating, the goal is also that they get something fun. It should not be boring. And this means that receiving badges should have playful kind of, depending the brand, obviously, but a nice tone, as well as having all the mechanism to recognize, to be clear of what are valued in the community.
Okay, really great insight, because many customers come to us or in general say, okay, we need gamification, it will improve the participation, but it's just a launch. Why do you need a gamification at first place? So I think so that rush that you talked about is really what we also feel, that it's only because everyone is talking about gamification when you have a community. It's only that trend that they want to keep in place. So I think so definitely that is one of the things that we really talk about. And from our point of view, being a community developer or consultants, we also feel that yes, gamification plays a very important role, but when it is implemented and how it is implemented. So I think so really, really good insight on that. So Todd, we want to know about the community generated content. Is it a game changer? And how your brands are encouraging or using it to make it more productive, their communities?
So I think this is one of the challenges of the time that we live in, where we are in the midst of people being more aware of how fragile the trust is in online social media environments, the big platforms abrogating their responsibility to fact check or to even moderate in meaningful ways in those spaces, making people feel less safe, but also the kinds of algorithms that operate in those spaces, which make people feel vulnerable, but also encourages the most ephemeral, rage-creating kinds of content that leads to like a lot of just very surface-level interaction. It's our responsibility within online community spaces to make those spaces safe for deeper interactions, creating higher quality knowledge to help people feel more connected and more responsible or accountable to each other within those spaces. And so there's some safety considerations, around building the space in such a way that people can feel free to share what's on their mind, but also the encouragement and gamification can play into this. Encouragement to make better content, drive deeper discussions, have these places solve problems actually for people and build more meaningful outcomes. This is a sacred trust that we as community professionals have to build that better space and to help fulfill the original optimism that we had about what the internet can do and mean for people. And so, Michel was mentioning a little bit earlier, moving people, to more intrinsically motivated ways of participating in the community. Part of that is encouraging quality kinds of content and then spotlighting that generated content, lifting it up for others to see that as a great example so that they create more of those things rather than just riding the rage train that we live on in X and Facebook every day.
Yeah, definitely, Todd. But when we are talking about that user-generated content and as AI has come into picture, do you feel that user-generated content is somewhat AI-generated content? Or because we know earlier it was the people who was writing the content because AI was never the part of that whole journey. But now the chat GPT, and as soon as you get something, send it across, you'll find a draft with very fancy words written in it. So being in the community world, have you guys experienced that what we talk about the user generated content has somehow been impacted by the AI stuff?
Oh, I think it's absolutely going to be impacted. I made a comment in the chat a little earlier. I think we're all figuring out what kind of cyborgs we are. We now have this writing companion, chat buddy, sort of along with us for the ride, pretty much throughout our work days. If you're a technology person, or you're reasonably comfortable playing with these tools, you're probably going to run what you're saying past that platform to see if you've missed anything, to see if there's maybe a better way to phrase it or to say it. I mean, I think it's just a fact of life. We're going to see that impacting the way that user-generated content is created. I think it's got the potential to create higher quality content, but just like any new tech, we need to develop a level of maturity around its use.
Definitely, because otherwise the user-generated content gonna be prompts to any of the chat bots saying that, okay, this is my pointers. Can we convert it into something very beautiful, some content? So totally on that. So Brian, I think so. You have developed a lot of communities. You have discussed, had a customers where we talk about gamifications, right? Do you think, is it a game changer in the today's world, or it is just a feature for some? So
yeah. Well, I'll say this, that I think gamification is one of the most misunderstood sort of things in community building. I think that term alone, evokes a certain thought, and feeling around what it is and what it could be. I guess the short version for the audience here, my advice would be a couple of things. One, if you think about, okay, let's use the word gamification, games, into the content question is the same way. In our personal lives, what kind of games do we play? We play the ones that we enjoy, right? And what kind of content do we consume? The ones that we connect with and we enjoy and we want more of, right? So it's really incumbent upon us as community builders, as we think about both of those things, to build for our members, not what we need, right? Because a lot of gamification is, hey, how can we get them to post more so we can pump up our numbers or whatever? And you can do that. But I think what you'll find is that you're going to get a lot better success overall if we actually think deeply about who our members are, what they want, what's going to be a great outcome for them. And then let's go build that, from a gamification perspective. The second part about that is it's not for everybody, and that's okay, right? So you often hear people say, well, we built this badge program, we built this ranks, we have leaderboards, we have all this stuff, and people don't care. And it's like, well, probably a very small subset of people, a small percentage of your overall member base really do care. And that's actually who we're building it for. And if other people don't want to participate in it or don't find value in it, I think that's okay, right? And so I think sometimes we try to build these systems as a catch-all for everybody. And the reality of it is that it's really only going to be relevant to maybe your top 10% or something of your members. And that's okay. And that's a worthy goal. And it's better to build for that than trying to build, for everybody. So I think there's a bunch of things there. On the content question, to kind of follow up, on what Todd was saying, I said in the chat earlier, it's just worth voicing here for folks maybe that aren't, cruising the chat, is that I think different kinds of communities, that answer is going to be very different. And so, if you're going to a technical support community for your laptop or your phone or something, do you really care if the content or the answer is generated or summarized or whatever by AI? If in fact it is the correct answer with the right steps, I actually don't think you do, right? I think the utility is going to be more valuable to people than was this written by a human or not. But on the other side, if we're in some of those niche communities we were talking about before, right? Support groups, people that have the same health condition, mental health, like these kinds of things. You're absolutely going to want to know that you're talking to real people that have the shared experience that you have. And so I think as an industry, what we need to do, and I linked a presentation earlier in the chat as well, where I talked about this, is we need to build authentication and verification systems that then flow into our communities, almost like some sort of portable digital passport or something. So it's very clear, who you were talking to. Is this a real human or not? And, like this has been tried on social networks a little bit, like we've seen, blue checks, and that's a whole thing we won't get into here. The spirit of that was I think correct. The implementation was not. But the idea of, am I talking to a person? Is this a verified human? I think is going to become more important over time for specific types of communities, and then other ones not. So I just want to be careful about that, because I think a lot of times we build these broad generalizations. It has to be this way or this way. And I think, the consultant answer applies here, which is it depends.
Totally, Brian. And I totally go with you when we are talking about this human touch and when we are talking about the user-generated content. Because definitely, if a patient is talking about to another patient for the journey, it's the real human they are looking for. It's not the chatbot that, okay, I have this symptoms, I have same symptoms, okay, you have this problem. But I think so it's more related to how the experience went, what the journey was. And definitely there, the user-generated content should be from the real humans. And totally agree on you. Gamification, definitely people come to us for gamification, and it's like, where do you want it? It's not the phase one thing that you launch a community, you have a gamification. First, see the interest of the people, and then you can think of gamification. So definitely, and this is for our viewers who are attending this webinar, that please feel free to put your question in the chat. We'll be definitely taking a lot of time to discuss it at the end of the webinar to try to answer all your questions. One important thing that we all were discussing was the new policies, the trust, the transparency. So our next topic is very related to it. when we are talking about the trust, transparency, and moderation, because moderation is one of the key part of any community we have. So as the community, we want to grow our trust. We want to make sure that data is secure. That's because policies are changing every day. In every other country, there is a different set of policies. And we are not aware sometimes that whether we are following that or not. But from the community world, we want to understand how we want to strike a balance of the engagement and privacy. So Todd, we'll start with you because we understood from the previous conversation, you were talking a lot about that. So what do you think about this balance? How important is the balance that we need to strike between the privacy and the engagement in the communities?
Yeah, I'm taking a big breath here to think about this as a very large topic. So as I think about creating trust within spaces so that people feel free to share what's on their minds. People that have heard me before will remember I talk about 3 levels, within a community. One is the platform level. There needs to be transparency about how data is going to be handled, about what the moderation rules are, about the kinds of, not just sort of the rules of the road, but the kinds of things that you're encouraging within the community. What kinds of conversations, what kinds of content do we want to create in this space? So first level is platform. Second level is organization. Why are you convening this space? Why, what are you going to do with the information that goes into this platform? How is it going to be utilized by the organization to improve products or services? And how transparent are you about exactly how granular that information is that you're gleaning from the participants in the community? What rights do they have to use your information in the space? I think we've all become worse, rather blithe about the fact that LinkedIn or Facebook can own or use our content that we contribute within that platform. And what does that mean, for us? Well, right now, I don't know, but, I think a lot of Reddit users were surprised when they learned that their data had been sold for AI training with OpenAI. So there's definitely some questions about that. And I think then the third level is around the people in the community themselves. Like, can I trust the other people who are here? Are they here for about the same reasons as I am? Are they bots? Are these real people that are in the space? Per the amusing chat we've had on the side here, are we all humans? In this space? So I think those things need to be considered in any kind of community build. And if you can establish the architecture of trust within those given spaces, engagement can then follow a lot more easily.
Definitely, Todd. We totally agree on that. And Brian, I know we have already touched to some points on moderation of the community, but we want to share more details. Attendees here, what moderation and how important it is for the community members, because we know when we talk about community, moderation is something that comes automatically with the community as a pass, saying, okay, we need to moderate the content. But what about the moderation? Brian, could you provide some insight on how the moderation is impacting the community and how much important it is for the community?
Yeah, I would love to get on my soapbox about moderation for a couple of minutes here. I guess here's my hot take of the day is that most of the moderation I see out on the internet today is just bad, like real bad, right? And I think it's because there's several reasons. One is we just haven't really educated and enabled people about what really good, proper moderation looks like. We have given people tools instead of enablement, right? So people think that lock, ban, delete is how you moderate. Really, really good and tenured moderators know that just your presence and being there and steering people and having conversations in DMs and that's actual moderating. Like, that's how you really build a healthy culture and a healthy community. And the tools are last resort. Right? Those are just something that you use along the way. So I think, overall, it's incumbent upon all of us to either help educate and enable people to be good moderators, or if you are a practicing professional to seek out, great resources on what does it mean to be a good moderator and what are the kinds of skills I should build. I've published a bunch of that stuff. I think Todd has, as well, Koros, et cetera. So that it's out there. It's not as if it doesn't exist. It's there. Most of it's free or super low cost, right? So I think, moderation is and will always be important. I think the nature of it's going to change a little bit with, some of these tools, back to the AI thing and some of that. One point I want to make, and then I'll pause, is in the chat, I saw some people talking about, members using AI like ChatGPT to compose their posts, right? And then basically copying and pasting that into community, and like what a moderation challenge that can be, and sort of the backlash from communities. We've seen this, right, with the Stack Overflows of the world, where they kind of flip-flopped on like, no AI generated, now you can because we have one, and like this sort of thing. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I just want to make the point that I don't think that we should automatically assume that because someone is posting, something copied from AI, that they have bad intent, or that, they're a bad person, or that we shouldn't allow that content. There are a lot of uses for it where people are, if, for example, English is your second language or third language, or something like that, that you might want to use a tool like that to eliminate spelling mistakes or grammar, or, there's a lot of like, you start thinking about people with disabilities, right? There's so many use cases in which like there's a reason why someone would use a tool like this. And I think, rather than sort of automatically assume everybody's a villain and delete those posts and, that sort of thing, we should understand like why they're doing that. How correct is the answer, or is it contributing in a positive way or not, to the conversation? I also think that this is one of those things that we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole. Like if this is your biggest concern ever, and you're going to, put a blanket statement, policy, I should say, in your community to say no AI generated, content, I wish you well, right? Because I think these systems are just going to keep getting better and better and better. And eventually you're probably not going to be able to tell. So I think what's more important is that we set the bar at, hey, every contribution, regardless of where it comes from or what it originates from, is useful and helpful and has a high level of accuracy, and those kinds of things. And if you say, hey, we're just going to say no AI whatsoever, then you're probably going to have a private community where you only allow people in that you can verify as a human, which drastically changes the use case and strategy of your community. So I think it's like really nuanced, and there's a lot to think about, and it's easy for those of us that are perfectly able to say, well, I just type everything. I don't know why you'd ever need to use one of these products. I think when you start talking to communities of people with disabilities and, these kinds of things, it becomes clear that there's actually very legitimate use cases, and we should be a little careful about how we kind of paint them.
Definitely. And Brian, totally with you on this, because there shouldn't be any rule that AI content shouldn't be there in the community, because it's only the sentiment or the analysis whether that content is genuine or not. If it is not impacting anyone's sentiments, even if it's AI generated content and it is adding some value, then definitely it should be part of community. So definitely people should be more aware why we are using the chatbots, but definitely that is one of the key thing that we will be coming more in discussion in future. That maybe some people say all the content in this particular community is AI generated. Maybe that's a possibility. But people are so smart now that they want everything to be perfect, even their posts. So definitely they will be trying some chatbots, some tools to make it perfect. I think so. Michel, any of your thoughts on this before we jump into next question?
Yes, in fact, that made me think about some cases I meet where, in fact, moderation policies can be influenced by fear that they don't really know how people will react. And so instead of just opening and trust that members will behave and not post harmful things or just mislead with answers that are not the right ones, they can take an approach where they are very strict. And to Brian's point, at some point, said moderation is bad, because in fact they are not taking the step of, well, I'm a user and I'm so having empathy around what members need and will contribute to. So there will be, the brands could be taking approach like, well, let's just pre-moderate everything. Nothing gets public until we have eyes on it, etc. Which in some cases can be justified because there may be some compliance law, etc., depending on the topic. But most of the case, they aren't. And it's just like misplacing trust, because they should trust more on the users, and also trust the moderators to be more natural and not having, let's say, robotic answers, or I would say more constrained and limited.
Yeah, totally. Thank you everyone for such a great insight on gamification, making sure about the trust, about the how everything should be coming in package together. I think so we can cater one more question. We are talking about data privacy. We are talking about community analytics. And that's something that is really of the interest of users, because when we talk about community analytics, we totally think about the ROI of the community, the success of the community, because community analytics is number, what we think, right? So just want to have more details about data privacy. What is the strike balance when we are talking about data privacy? Because if it's a public community, how we cater that, okay, this is a balance. Here, from this, if we cross this limit, we are hampering the privacy of our users. So Brian, if you want to jump in and provide more details on both the topics, like analytics, community analytics, and the data privacy. I know separate domains, but in how related to one another.
Yeah. Well, first of all, hey, everybody, follow the law. In your country or wherever you operate, okay? Like that's a good guideline. Yeah, to be honest, I don't get why, we need to collect gobs of data about people. I don't know to what extent that's useful to most organizations. And I know this because I used to work at data science companies, and I watched companies collect tons of data and then have no clue what to do with it. And so there is sort of this like default posture of, we must ask many questions during the sign-up flow and, do these kinds of things. And then we never do anything with the data. And all that it ends up being is a huge liability, for us as an organization. So I think, ultimately the golden rule applies here, and you should just ask as you're designing your community, how would I want to be treated or tracked or not, or whatever. And, that answer plus following the regulations in your your local area or globally is probably going to lead you, to the right answer. I do think that this is more and more on people's minds, right? It's in the news all the time. There's tons of regulation popping up, especially in the EU about this, which I think is, a noble venture. How it's implemented, we can argue about, but I think the core of, what we're doing is good. So I think to the extent to which you collect the least amount possible and then be really transparent with your community about what you are and why is a good thing. On the analytics side of it, yeah, it's interesting. I think, there's a lot of business cases for why people, need stronger analytics. Ultimately vendors do a pretty decent job of, hey, here's our dashboard and the things you can learn. Going back to my days at the, data science companies, the real reality of it is if you want to kind of take your measurement and analytics to the next step, it's all about getting the data out of the community platform into a data lake or like wherever the rest of your business data is, Salesforce, so that you can mix and match it and blend it and, find out all kinds of interesting things through cohort analysis. So what then becomes incumbent for people is, as they're evaluating platform vendors, is to know, do they have, bulk exports, bulk data APIs, those kinds of things? How easy is it for me actually to flow data, back and forth to the community? Because if it's all just locked in there, then you're going to have a hard time, kind of with your more advanced analytical approaches.
Okay, great. I think so. Follow the law. That's the primary one. And if we are talking
what a
about
crazy
data
concept.
privacy yeah, we are building a community, but you need to follow the law. Okay, but that's how it is, because we don't want to get into trouble for anything and everything what we are doing on the community. Michel, being on the chorus side, because you are the one who is actually working on the platform for the platform. So what do you think? Because you have customer across the globe. You have customer from Europe, where we have so much strict guidelines and so on. So what do you think about this data privacy, and what about the community analytics? Because I know being a strategist, discussing about the analytics part is one of the key factor for you. So if you could provide more insight on that.
Yes, well, so about data privacy, well, this is a need. And I recall I was working on another company when GDPR appeared. And that was a great change because it was a company with an app, so it was collecting, like Brian mentioned a bit earlier, a bit too much than necessary, and that forces us to just be like just eating what we have in our plate and not needing for more. In fact, that's probably the best take from just good measurement is just collect what is needed. So probably a couple of infos because we need to identify the person who's interacting in the community, but the rest is mostly focused on the content. So what are they speaking about? Is it trafficked and so on. So there is a compliance bit with GDPR, DSA, etc. that is just to keep, I would say, healthy and just eat what we have on our plate, and the rest is more around just collecting what's really needed, so to inform then further actions like a community plan, a content plan, and so on. So just doing what is needed to treat that.
Okay, great insight. Definitely collect the data, whatever you require, nothing more than that. Okay, so Todd, what about you? What is your experience on data privacy and this analytic part of the community?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say that what is top of mind for me is a very large online community that I work with right now that has to be HIPAA compliant and obey data privacy rules. And certainly there's disclosure, as somebody signs up for the community, there are statements in the privacy policy that's available there, and usually some regular reminders in the community that, in fact, in that particular community, it's usernames and not actual names, for the members. And I think those are important protections for anyone that has a health condition or an addiction or anything like that. That there are definite protections in place. Brian's got the data sciences background, so I will definitely bow to him, for that. But I think that idea of being able to export some of that data for insights is tremendously important. And at a time where I see greater awareness in community world of the necessity for interacting more meaningfully with other departments within an enterprise. And you don't get those insights without combining some data sets and figuring out what people want or what they're looking at. But from a transparency standpoint, it's important that you bring some of that information back into the community to explain how we're using the data and showing them so that there aren't surprises, so that people do not feel like they've been taken advantage of, within that space, and how it's being used to improve their experience within the community and as a user of that platform or the products or services that an organization is providing.
Yeah, great, Todd. So I think so. As we are growing the communities, and as we know that tomorrow also maybe some new policies will come up, but I think so we need to make sure that we follow. For being successful, we need to make sure that we follow these policies, but these policies shouldn't hamper the innovations that is coming from the community. Okay, I think so we have 30 minutes left almost, so we'll cater the last question, because as we are talking about our topic of the community is trends and prediction. So we want to understand, we want to know more details on what the future holds for us in the community world. What are the trends? What you guys predict for it? Because we know a lot of new technologies are coming up, which would be impacting the communities. We know a lot of integrations are coming up, which may be giving a community as a one-stop shop. But from all this, what we have discussed about a lot of other topics, but this is one of the major things which our audience would be more eager to know. What next? What is the future? So Brian, Todd, Michel, feel free to add your thoughts on what is the future in the online communities. Anyone can. I need to name it now. So Todd, you go first.
Go for it, Todd.
I mean, huge question. I'll go back to what I said a little bit earlier. I mean, I think this is the time for enterprises to be making small bets and experimenting, a piece at a time, see what works, seeing what resonates. I mean, adoption of new tools and technologies that impact community like AI or blockchain or virtual reality or any of these so-called convergence sorts of technologies should be based on the audience readiness to do some of those, to take some of those bets, make some of those experiments, see what resonates with your community, and tell them what you're going to do, do it and then tell them what you did, I think is a good rule of thumb. My orientation throughout my career working in communities has been that the tech should serve the community, not vice versa. And, we sometimes focus a little too much on the bits and bytes and need to be thinking a little bit more about the humans, that are being served. I think as community professionals, by and large, we do that. It sometimes gets abstracted in the broader enterprise organization. So, I would say for, things coming down the road, there's obviously going to be a lot more disruption. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity are the rule of the day. And so there will be things that happen this year that we never foresaw. But I think, based on the signals that we're seeing right now, the low trust in the bigger online social media spaces is going to probably drive more people into private community spaces or more niched community spaces. There's good and bad with that. There's opportunities for deeper connection and trust and belonging, but there's also opportunity for deeper balkanization and polarization that are already big problems across the world for us that we as community professionals need to be mindful about and thinking about.
Agreed. Definitely. So, Brian, Michel, you want to go first?
Yeah, if I can. Maybe I may be biased by just the experiences I have and people I work with, but I see more a focus on offering to people what they really need, so that's the content bit. Or it is like a brand being able to offer something so to attract, because when launching this cannot be empty, of course, or just making sure that there is still relevant content there, because with all the AI summarization, search, etc., there is a fear of basically being cannibalized in some shape or form. And the point is keeping relevancy, so we still have members participating, and because they are the ones who create the data, who creates the content that AI can then learn on. So we hear that lots of time, but content is still king, because this is what will still maintain value for the community.
Okay, Brian, what's your thoughts on trends and predictions?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, and then there's some really good questions in the chat too. I was just taking a look at. So one is, I think, return to ownership, and what I mean by that is, in the last couple of years, there was sort of this rush for a lot of companies to sort of do more of a kind of distributed model. Let's say, right? Hey, we're going to go build our community on Reddit, on Facebook, on X, these places, for myriad reasons that, if you read the news, you all know. There's kind of a pullback from that now, and everybody's kind of headed back towards, hey, maybe we're better off if we own this, on our domain, and we control a little bit more of the experience and that kind of thing. So both a trend and a prediction. The other trend I'm seeing kind of in my side of the world is that marketing, specifically customer advocacy and what they now call community marketing, is owning the budget and really driving these a lot from the enterprise side. So, we have these eras, right? Like support kind of own community. And then in the 2020s, like success and marketing, we're owning it. I think now we're sort of back to marketing driving a lot of it. It's a bit of a blanket statement because it's different across a lot of companies, but I'm just noticing a lot more advocacy teams kind of owning it. I think it's Sihaba, I want to say, sorry if I'm not saying that correctly, in the chat had a really good point, which was my third bit here. Was sort of the generational shift part of it. I think sometimes we over-index a little bit and say it's all going to be different because of Gen this, Gen that, millennials, boomers, whatever. I think there's still a lot of commonalities in how communities will, continue to operate regardless of that. But there's very real things, right, about their preferences and how they prefer to communicate and the types of experiences they grew up with, whatever generation it is. So I do think that it's incumbent upon all of us, especially the platform vendors, to think about what those are and, start to architect our communities in a little bit different ways. Is that all going to happen this year? Is that a 2025 thing? I think, hopefully it's the start of a long, process in that.
Yeah, definitely. Because in the community has come a very long way, because I think so a few weeks back, I was having one discussion with one of the person who is in community world from last 20 years. And when I was discussing about the communities, she mentioned we used to use Excel when we talk about communities. And it was like, really? And that was like, yes, it was Excel where we used to put down the questions and answers. So definitely, and that was the time, and today is the time when we are talking about the AI. We are talking about how AI is building the community, the user content, and so definitely there is a long way, and the trends and predictions is just what we can think of. And what we are seeing today, maybe 2026 holds more different from the platform point of view, from the strategies, from the community managers point of view. So great insight on all. And I think so, as you mentioned, Brian, there are some interesting questions. And without further ado, let's jump in with picking some of the questions from the chat. So one question which I find very interesting. So let's start with that. And the question is, in this era of layoffs, how do we make the best cases for keeping the expensive community platforms like Influtive, including in the budget? Revenue attribution, sure. What do you think about it? Because layoff is one thing, community predictions, community use is another thing, and the platform costs. So definitely how you want to balance that out.
Well, I think there's two different questions potentially there. One is on the layoff side of it, right? There's the, I think the more cross-functional you are, the more embedded you are across the business, the more people that you provide value to in different departments of your organization, the higher likelihood it is for people to understand what you do and that it's valuable, and that throwing it away would be, a bad idea. With that said, we also know that a lot of layoffs are kind of arbitrary spreadsheet exercises. So even if you do a great job, it doesn't mean that you can't be laid off, but it can certainly help. I think the thing I wanted to kind of key in though, is sort of the word of like expensive. And I always help people, I always ask the question, compared to what? Like, yes, from a line item perspective in your business, you might say, wow, it's, we have this platform or platforms, and maybe it's $60,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is. I would reframe inside of your business this to away from a cost center, sort of discussion into a value discussion, right? I think if you're viewed solely as a, wow, look at this big expense we have to pay every year or every month or whatever, you've probably set yourself up for bad times. Whereas if the conversations you're having are, hey, it's an investment and I'm saving the company money, I'm generating leads, I'm generating business. We know from all the analytical stuff we were talking about earlier, right? We know that people that are in community buy more, stay longer, advocate for us more. That's a different conversation, right? That's a value. Hey, community's an investment. And even though it's expensive, if you can get to a dollar figure and tell your organization, hey, did you know that community's saving $10 million a year? Who cares if you're spending 60 grand, right? It's just a different way to frame it. So I would kind of pivot away, from that to a more value conversation.
It's not rare to have this value conversation popping back because team changes, there is a new sponsor in the organization. So there is like a bit of internal education to restart. And that's where being clear on connecting what the business is looking for, what the community brings, and having more direct conversation around, could be the deflection could be, what do we lose when we don't have the community? And so that removes this, let's just kill that line because it costs X.
Yeah, and we saw it because when we are talking about layoff, budget control, why the community is getting impacted. Because it's like, okay, we don't have the budget for the community. And if we go the other way around, it's the value it is holding for. It is showcasing your brand. It is catering your customers. Then how can it show the value, what we are talking about? Okay, Todd, you want to add some insights to this question because this is something very interesting.
Yeah, maybe I'll just put a coda on it. What Brian said, what Michel said. I think they expressed it really brilliantly. At the end of the day, I think any CEO, COO, CFO that you talk to care about three things. They care about reducing risk, they care about creating efficiencies, and they care about growth. And if we're having trouble justifying the budget for a community platform, it's because we failed at one of those three narratives and talking about how it brings those things through.
Wow, such a beautiful consolidation of all the answers we got. Okay, I think so. Next is do you anticipate a significant shift in community engagement strategies as Gen Zs and younger audience becomes a dominant users?
Yes.
That's the quick one. Okay.
Thanks for
Which is
coming
the
out,
constant
everybody.
though,
Okay. So Brian, Todd, you mentioned a big yes. Yes. So what do you?
I mean, change is the constant. As we start to see a greater, swell of a different set of preferences from younger members, younger users of our community, platforms. The platforms are going to have to change, and whether that means that they're going to look more like virtual worlds, in the future, I don't know. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm going to die in a couple of years, so I think there are. Well, hopefully not a couple of years. Hopefully I got a few more than that. But I think that we need to be aware of what those changing preferences and needs are, as we move ahead, and whether that's small screen preferences, whether it's short, micro burst communications as opposed to longer, deeper posts. I think all of those are potentials or things that we need to be thinking about.
So that echoes what you said a bit earlier around not being afraid to experiment, because there will be some suppositions and we'll have to adapt to the people we want to address. So what do they like?
Okay, Brian, what about these Gen Zs we are talking about here?
I'm not a Gen Z expert, obviously. I'm an old man compared to our Gen Z friends, but I think there's pretty clear differences in how they communicate, how they prefer to communicate. Their take on privacy and that sort of thing is I think a differentiator amongst cohorts for previous generations as well. I think ultimately we have to just acknowledge that they grew up largely with iPads and iPhones, and they grew up with technology, right? It's all they've ever known. And so they have a very different perspective on it and what they think a good experience is versus maybe some of us old people. So, I think it's just, we should always be working on our experience, generational change or not, to be better for whoever our audience is. So I guess my advice is just simply that, I would understand who your audience is, what they care about, what's a good outcome to them, and go build that, and then also follow the law.
Okay. The next one is, in an increasingly fragmented digital landscape, how do you predict successful online community with demonstrated and delivered tangible values to their members and stakeholders by 2025? And how will community leaders create sustainable model for long-term community health? A big question. So who wants to get started? Definitely, we all will be adding our values, but what is the digital landscape when we are talking and successful online communities? Because when we talk about community, it's the ROI, the success. So it's like a collaboration of all together here. Brian, you want to go for it? Or
yeah, I don't think it's changed much, I guess, from my perspective. I think a lot of the things we've been trying to build this up for several decades now. I think most of what we've learned and best practices and those things stay the same. I think that's what's always hard about these trends and predictions conversations is people want us to come and say it's all going to change next week, and here's how. And I think certainly things change, but changes takes time, right? And so probably 80% or 90% of what we know today to be true about successful strategies of communities remain largely true over the next decade, and there's some accounting for whatever that extra 10-20% is for things that are happening. So I think that's what's challenging too with like the AI part of the conversation, is that I think it's going to be more iterative and sort of evolution over time in these communities as opposed to revolution. So I wish I had some big hot take for you. I think a lot of this stuff it's good, right? It's a good thing that we have a handle on a lot of these, successful things. I think our challenge is, as it has always been, the education side of it and helping companies understand all this stuff that we're talking about, for the last hour and 15 minutes and how to do it, the right way as we see it.
Definitely.
I still find myself educating leaders and executives about the same stuff I was talking about back in 2014. The battle never ends, right? All I would say in response to it is, be your own futurist. If you follow anything having to do with future foresight or future foresight studies, it's a matter of collecting signals, things that you're seeing in the news, little data points, trying to turn those into things that are potential threads and imagining the futures that you'd like to see come from that. It's not a matter of prediction, it's a matter of anticipation and trying to shape the future into the things that you'd like them to be. So you want your communities to be more sustainable, start selecting and looking at the data points of stories and ideas and things that are making things individually more sustainable, and then starting to think about the scenarios you can create to build into that future that you want to see. Sorry, Michel, you were about to jump in and I just kind of hogged the stage again mercilessly as we old guys do. So
that's great. You needed to continue your train of thoughts. But in fact, I wanted to thank you just to mention that you're still educating on basic stuff, because one of the ideas that I got was basically, well, in fact, what we see is a bit of a back to basics. Because in recent conversations I've been pulled in, there is still conversations around, well, how do we frame the conversation around value recognition? How do we fight bad actors? How do we measure this and that? So there is a kind of cycle of getting back to that, just to have strong foundations. So then that prepares the team to be ready, so to grow their communities and stay relevant. So yes, that's made me think about that.
Okay. I think so we can pick up a next question. We have few minutes left before we wrap up. So as we talk about AI-driven personalization, so the question is related to it. How do you see AI-driven personalization evolving in online communities that we talk about? It's the addition to it is beyond the basic automation and chatbots. How the AI driven in personalizing in the community. It's not about the chatbot they want to listen or automation. What more to it?
So I would understand that as well. The experience piece. What are we bringing with the personalization to the members? So triggering automation that are useful to them. So could be because there was a participation in a real life event. This connects via AI magic and triggers something in other platform or in real life, depending where the person is. So the personalization will be just to connect the dots with other things that are not only community related, so things elsewhere, and also via the data available, being able to, so being interesting for the person. So by bringing recommendations on content or depending on what they are doing. So more like a friendly guide on, well, you're interested with this, so you should read that, and getting a bit of that flow to consume community content.
Okay, awesome. Brian, Todd, your thoughts on it?
Well, let me just paint a picture, I guess, because I think this would be the easiest way to just, I think that if we can combine community data with product telemetry, with what we know about people from Salesforce, their support interactions, then we actually have an opportunity to do a couple of things. One is build a highly kind of personal experience. Remember Clippy, everybody? We all, made fun of Clippy. We hated Clippy. But I think, so if you think about, like, if I'm a SaaS company and I have a product, let's say it's a workflow-based product, right? I drop 2-3 things on the canvas. What would be really great is if everything that it knows about me, and it says, hey, it looks like you're trying to build this kind of a workflow, or it looks like you're trying to accomplish this kind of task, right? Here's some resources for you, some which may come from community, or it may just, say, hey, like, here's a few articles, here's a few conversations, click here to ask a follow-up question, do it directly in the product. Those are the kinds of experiences I hope we get to, where it's really additive, right? And it's really valuable to people to unblock them or move them forward faster, even if that means making community essentially a service that underpins that, and we're flowing that into the product as opposed to relying on them to get stuck and go to the community to ask their question. And so it's not to say that I want to, say never go to the community, don't discuss anything, that sort of thing. It's actually just how do we use what we have smarter and how do we get them to that? There's some precedent for this in the world today for our US audience. TurboTax has been injecting their community into their product interface for years now. So you can ask questions right there as you prepare your taxes or whatever. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, is that it's very additive and valuable and really gets people down the road a heck of a lot further than they would otherwise. That to me is would be a really great development and a positive use of this technology.
Okay, Brian, great insight about what AI, apart from chatbot and automation, we are talking in the community. Todd, any thoughts before we pick the last question for us And I think so we are gonna wrap up in next 8 minutes or so.
I'll just say that the Clippy was inescapable. Let's move on, Shaveta.
Okay. Just a last question. What are the trends for in-product help? Are there companies on this call who can offer the search in-product for the customer? I think so. That's more like search is what Grazity is working on, and definitely that is where we are talking about the Search Unify and where we are talking about AI embedded searches and a lot of the products that we have. Brian, you have used Search Unify. What's your take on it?
Yeah, just broadly, I've used that particular product. I also use all the consumer searches as, search products as well. And it's funny because I think personally that sort of the thing where you go to a box somewhere and you type something in and you get an AI summary as well as the links, to the conversations, to the websites, whatever context it is. It's kind of funny because I think it's going to be one of those things that's a stated versus revealed preference, right? And what I mean is that people are like, oh, this AI, I hate this AI, whatever. I got to tell you, I kind of get a lot of value myself personally out of the summarization of things. I just moved. I'm trying to do all this stuff to my house. It's actually really helpful to just go into a search box in, Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever and type something in. And it's like, here's the 5 steps. You don't need to click any of these links or work through them. Now, the first time that leads me astray and, is a bad thing and I destroy my home, then, I'll probably think twice about using those summaries. But I think the utility is actually quite strong. And the more that you use it, the more comfortable you become with it, like anything else. So I'm personally a fan of it. Again, I think there's going to be contexts where it's not going to make sense and we shouldn't do it and whatever. But I think in the world that I live in, which is, enterprise tech support communities, it's a great addition to the overall experience. And I think everybody should be trying to figure out how to add it, at some point.
Sure. Michel, being on a community platform, how important do you feel about this AI thing in the search?
Well, the view is fighting the frustration. When brand has multiple digital properties and each one of them has their siloed search, obviously, like any user, you get mad if you don't find right away what you're looking at. So this enhanced search via AI or just having a good federated search gets to remove these pain points. So the opinion personally is, yes, good, then just making it relevant so we don't have to go across multiple content to find what we really need. So yeah, hoping we don't put fire in the house in the process, but getting to find that.
Okay. Todd, any of your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with Brian. Anytime you got to fix something in the house, like if I got to fix a toilet or something like that, I want to get the answer sooner than later. And I think the utility of these sorts of summaries is, very impactful, and, it just needs to hit you personally to understand, just how helpful that can be. So I really do like to see these things in search. I'm sure there will be use cases where they're not desired, but sorry for the people, but
Okay, no worries. So we are close to closing it. It's been only 5 minutes and it was an incredible discussion. We touched on AI, we discussed about the hybrid niche communities, we talked about gamification, trust, and data privacy. I think so. There is no topic which was untouched in the world of community that we all live in. And I really want to thank Todd, Brian, Michel, and our audience to be so patient listening to and asking the questions. In case we are not able to cater your questions here, definitely we'll get back to you. And if you are looking for more discussions, DM us, we'll provide you more details on it. And thank you so much, everyone. It was such a lovely having you all in this conversation. Thank you.